Government's Joint Delivery Unit, Operation Vulindlela, is being implemented. It aims to accelerate economic reforms by transforming network industries. These include water, electricity, transport and telcos. But business says its work is being hampered by red tape. Surprised? Well, Minister in the Presidency Mondli Kungubele and the Finance Minister Enoch Ndongwane gave an update on progress being made in implementing the Operation Vulindlela earlier today. Govan Whittles is following the developments there today, joining us now in the studio. Govan, good afternoon, welcome back and thank you for joining us. This whole process of reducing red tape has been going on for quite some time. How's the operation faring thus far?
It's faring well, Bradan, and it should really be viewed in context. Operation Vulindlela is important because it's a partnership between the Presidency and the Treasury, and it's meant to kind of break down the government departments working in silos, but also the cross-cooperation which is required to achieve some of the targets that this administration has set for itself. You look at something like the National Rail Policy, a document that we haven't had before, sets out exactly how the private sector will enter into agreements with Transnet to help operate the line, and those are the kind of commitments that Operation Vulindlela have made and are now delivering on. The same could be said with Eskom and the state of the system briefing that we heard Eskom saying that it would require private funding in order to meet the energy shortfall, which could stop load shedding. So things like rail and Eskom are high priorities for Operation Vulindlela, and they've already recorded some successes. The auctioning off of the spectrum was one of their priorities, something they're taking credit for. Let's listen to the Finance Minister now on exactly what kind of successes they've achieved so far.
These reforms are already bearing fruit. In digital communication, the successful allocation of high-demand spectrum not only raised more than 8 billion rand for the fiscals, recent estimates suggest that the industry will invest over 50 billion on the back of this. In transport, the successful implementation of third-party access to the freight rail network can spare an additional investment of 58 billion rand. In electricity, where we're working with the private sector to unblock the remaining challenges to free up embedded generation, we can realize investment of 54 billion rand.
Yeah, meanwhile, the energy crisis continues. Electricity still a challenge, Govan. This week, for the fifth day in a row today, another evening load shedding that's going to be implemented by Eskom. More power cuts from 5 o'clock until 10 o'clock. So did this come up? I mean, why is it not happening?
This is something we heard about not only from Eskom, but definitely Operation Vulindlela, the Minister of Finance and Minister in the Presidency. And essentially the problem here is not that private generation, private people who are generating power can't do that. The problem is that they're not registered with the National Energy Regulator of South Africa, NERSA, just yet. And they've described the process of registering their self-generation, which is for which the limit has now been raised to 100 megawatts, as a somewhat tedious process which needs to be reformed. And that's exactly the red tape that they're asking the people from Operation Vulindlela to cut. So while we know that there are private electricity producers who are on standby and who believe that they can supply the 4,000 to 6,000 megawatt shortfall, right now the focus is on NERSA and exactly what the Finance Minister and Minister in the Presidency can do to try and speed up the registration of that embedded generation so that it can plug into the grid and essentially bring load shedding to an end. Let's look again at what Enoch Ndongwane, the Minister of Finance, had to say about this issue.
While we welcome the progress of Vulindlela, this has seemingly been misinterpreted as premature or ignoring the very real frustrations on the ground at the slow pace of this reform that are not progressing well, or in the case of restoring Eskom's energy availability factor to 70%, seem completely unattainable. We are mindful of these reforms, and over the coming months, we'll redouble our efforts to resolve the energy crisis and ensure that the reforms facing implementation challenges access the support they need to progress.
Okay, that's about energy, Govan. But I mean, the Operation Vulindlela, as you alluded to when we began our conversation just now, is that it covers various sectors. It's not just about electricity. I mean, there could be other areas. What are those that they're really focusing on to remove those silos and improve efficiencies and the involvement of the private sector?
Well, they do believe that they can raise significant capital if they cut red tape in specific areas. The first of which is the digital sector, digital communications. And so far, they've raised the 8 billion, as the minister said there, but they hope to raise 54 billion more once they're able to smooth out and auction off more of the spectrum. Then, when it comes to the transport sector and the rail sector in particular, they hope through the partnership between Transnet and the private companies that will be assisting Transnet with the line to raise a further 58 billion rand. Then when it comes to water infrastructure, they've also partnered up between Rand Water and the specific municipalities, such as the ones here in Mfuleni, where they've got a 3-year agreement, and they're hoping that the unlocking of new opportunities by cutting red tape will also bring in some investment. Those are just 3 of the main areas that they're looking at, Bradan, but of course top of mind is Eskom at the moment. The big target that they've set is to return Eskom to a position where it has 70% electricity availability. At the last State of the System address, it had 62% electricity availability. So right now, Operation Vulindlela saying that they'll be putting a lot of energy, or energy, no pun intended, into looking at that issue.
But we need them to keep the momentum going, just to add to your pun there. But Presidency and the Finance Minister driving this. It's between Treasury and the Presidency, Operation Vulindlela. Thank you very much, Govan Whittles, there for that update. It's beginning to look a little bit more directional, but implementation is key, as we've been told by commentators, by analysts, but also by government ministers themselves, including Minister Mondli Kungubele, whom one day I hope and I wish to interview about this whole Operation Vulindlela and the fact that we're not far away, 8 years away from 2030, which is the target year for achieving some of the goals, if not all, of the National Development Plan, the NDP.